Alright, so now I'm just going to be continuing on. I'm just going to be starting more around the chest area now. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go with the arms here. I'm going to just kind of turn this into a leaf here. So that looks good so far. Let me just take a picture of this real quick so I can, because I forgot to take a picture of this earlier. There. So after I take the picture, now I'm going to continue. This is such a nice picture here. I think that'll be a good promotional image. Okay, so now let's go with the chest. I'm going to use my 05 again just to kind of get that delicate line going. And I'm just going to be outlining the silhouette here. Just so it'll be easier to line. So notice how I'm just kind of outlining the silhouette, and that'll give a better chance of knowing where else to line in this situation. And because, you know, these are kind of more ruffled, I'm going to be connecting some of these areas as kind of like little folds. I'm not going to line this too densely, I'm just going to indicate. So I have the hair here, of the braid, so I'm going to darken that area. So notice how my lines aren't, you know, too precise at this point. It's just kind of indication of folds. There. And now when it comes to the folds in the cloth here, I'm just going to be drawing these very smoothly. I'm also not going to draw that many in terms of line work because I always like to kind of add shading towards areas where, you know, with watercolor instead of, you know, just line work. So I'm just going to add it just a little bit, just indications of it, and then I'll color the rest or shade the rest in watercolor. So I'm going to take my number 1 tool again, or my number 1 line, and I'm just going to be drawing that ribbon because it's kind of a solid shape there. And then here we have the strap. Let's add a little bit of fold silhouettes underneath, just to show more texture. And then let's draw the bow underneath. And notice how I'm kind of doing this incrementally, just so it doesn't, just so I don't mess up. So I like, you know, kind of doing these like kind of like almost dotted lines, but not really, just to give it that, just to kind of continue on the line without, you know, messing up. I'm going to darken out the braids here because this looks a little bit light, and because this braid is in front, this needs to have a little bit darker lines in front of it. Same with this neck here. I'm going to darken it with my number 01 pen. For the face, I'm just going to go very carefully and just darken this area here around the chin where it starts touching the neck. There. Now we have our dress, which can be flowing outward. And this can just be done really simply as well. Just drawing the folds and just drawing light folds as well. I don't want you to go too dense with your line work at this point because we're going to be shading this with our we're going to be shading this with our watercolor anyway. Now, of course, if you're doing a similar piece as I am, that's fine. Notice how I kind of just went like that. Let me try and notice how I just kind of like went like sliding my arm. And because of that, it gave me a better shape. So I'm going to do that again. Fold and then glide your arm across. So the same goes for the ruffles in there as well. So there is her little dress area. Sorry, I don't have that much. I should zoom out a little bit, actually. So this is what this all looks like so far. We are almost done. All we really need left is the hair, as well as the flower swing. So once again, we're going to do that same thing again. I'm going to rotate this a little bit, and then I'm going to just trace back using my arm those long strokes. I make a thinner strand and then a thicker strand right next to it, just so it looks a little bit more dynamic. So notice how I'm almost always doing everything within one stroke. That just gives it better line quality, I believe. There. So that is one side of the hair all done, very quick. The other side can just be added on to it a little bit. Front side, back sides, etc. Alright, so we have the main character all nice and finished. Now we can go ahead and add in some of the details, such as, our flower petals. Add in some small ones, add in some big ones. I like to add big, medium, and small, like big, medium, and small, and then medium and small, and then just kind of like varying up the sizes, because that just looks nice and pretty. Now let's draw in a little butterfly. Let's draw in the other butterfly here as well. There. I'm going to add a little bit of darkness around the breast area because that's kind of like a prominent shape there, and it's like so, and the cloth is there too, so I'm going to just darken that outline right there. Just so it kind of stands out a little bit more. So pretty much, I guess we got some more flower petals here. Kind of just spread throughout the piece. Add some variety in the shapes, like so. And there we have the main character, the little flowers, not the flowers, the flower petals. And then all we really need to do left is our flower swing. So I will be right back. I'll take a small break. I'm actually going to darken some of these areas here on the hair. 1 second. Especially when it's coming from the outside, you want that area to be a little bit more dense, just to show that, this is the main character. This stands out, especially around the borders. So as you can see, adding more of these dark lines kind of frame the character in pretty much a lot better, rather than just, using thin lines all the time. Use dark lines to pop the figure out a lot more, especially around the shoulders and the body. The face and the body and the hands are usually areas that we like to look at. So to make, if we want to make those a little bit pop, if we want to make those pop out a bit more, then we do that. Alright, so that will be it for this video. Let me know what you guys think, and I will get to lining in the swings, and that'll be it. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. Alright, so now let's get on to drawing our flowers. And this would be a little bit tricky. Well, not really that tricky. It's just going to be kind of tedious. But first, let me go ahead and take a picture of this so I could put it in my download resources. There. And now let's go ahead and get started. So what we first want to do is take our number 101 pencil, and then, or pen, and then we're just going to be starting from the top. And kind of just adding our petals, surrounding it into the center. So notice I'm kind of just adding in petals and just surrounding them. So I will go ahead and do a close-up. So there's the center bud, and then all the other petals around it will be surrounding it. And it's following this round shape, by the way. You can also add varieties of other flowers as well, but I'm going to just make it rose-centric. And roses have also kind of spiny leaves as well, so if you want to add those little details, you can do that. So here will be more of like a closed bud. So this will have less petals, but forming into a ball. Notice how the leaves kind of give that outward silhouette. You want to aim for that. I'm going to just indicate the rest of the flowers on the top. So I'm going to draw some outer petals. So this is also kind of like a little bit of a side view as well. So I'm not trying to make them super detailed either, because the main focus is the face. I don't want the flowers to be too detailed. I just want them to be, sort of detailed. Just enough that, it shows that this is a flower. I'm going to add a flower kind of facing downwards this time. So rather than facing up, it's going to be facing down. So the center of the bulb will be more centered here. And this one can be kind of like centered or upward. So we'll see the bud kind of facing this way. So it's kind of facing a little bit up. Add some leaves for good measure. You can add a little bit more flowers, kind of just indicate it. And just look at it in comparison to the drawing. Like, is this standing out too much, or is this kind of like still in view? So the good thing about this is that this is a lot simpler than this complexity here. So by framing two complex areas and making this part simple, you actually start noticing the simple parts more. So I'm still going to keep this relatively not too detailed, but just enough that it doesn't catch away from the face. Sometimes when you have a lot of complex shapes or details or around the main center, just make sure that your center is simple so that the eyes can easily look into the character. If you make everything too complex and even the character too complex, then then it starts looking a little bit weird. So you want to have complex and then a little bit of simple, or you can do simple and a little bit of complex, just in areas of, areas of rest or simple. It's really mainly called areas of rest versus areas of complexity. So just make sure that your piece has a little bit of each. So you still want some complex areas. Complex areas are mostly focused on your subject, whereas areas of simplicity can serve as like a buffer for everything else. So this flower will be facing more downward. So I'm going to zoom in. And adding different directions to these flowers as well is also important because it just kind of shows that this is kind of like a three-dimensional object. By the way, I've drawn flowers many times, so I know how to draw flowers. If you need to do reference, go ahead and use that. I know how to layer petals, so that doesn't look like, just petals just on the sides everywhere. You want to make sure that, your petals are enveloping each other. And it's actually kind of therapeutic to draw flowers like that, It's almost kind of like equivalent to doodling. So it's always kind of nice. So I like drawing big flowers as well, just because it kind of gives bits of areas of rest because the details aren't as complex as small ones. So I'm making some bigger ones here. So I'm kind of in the zone right now. That's why I don't really, so I'm not really talking right now. Sometimes when I'm getting in the zone, I'm like, okay, I'm concentrating. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, I gotta explain what I'm doing. I'm just really doing the same thing over and over. So I'm kind of lessening the detail as I go downward because I don't, simple, when you kind of start indicating that, just starts meaning that, you want your center of attention here on the subject and not too much down here. But this kind of level of detail is good enough. There. So let's look at this as in a kind of a overall view. So I'm actually liking this level of detail here because if I do a level of detail here with the same thing as that really kind of closes in on the subject. So that's what I'm going to continue doing. So I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. It took over about almost 10 minutes to do all of that, which is not too bad in terms of time. So I'm always liking to identify the center of the bud. I'm just gonna surround my petals around as well. I'm always trying to center it around where the center bud starts. So that's kind of how I usually like to draw flowers. So rather than drawing one pet at a time, I like to figure out the center and then kind of wrap my flowers around that. I like getting these leaves because it kind of gives a different feel. It just gives a little bit of a different kind of texture or kind of different kind of feeling. So rather than just all flowers everywhere, the leaves kind of give a break of material. So I'm adding a little bit of stem here, or a little bit of rope, quote unquote. Kind of just breaking that, thickness here. So here's the center bud. And now I'm just going to rotate all, or kind of just draw in all my petals surrounding that area. So I'm using my 01 pen, by the way, because my 05 pen is not going to cut it. I'm going to have to get a new one at some point. Oh, yeah. There. If you want, you can also look at reference. Totally fine. You can look at flower swings, you can look at whatever that you need to do for your illustration. Now, I'm not expecting you guys to do the same illustration that I'm doing. I'm doing illustrations that I like to do, so I also should suggest that if you want to do illustrations that you like to do, feel free to do that. So let's make this one a little bit bigger, so it's kind of like enveloping. So here's the center. Now everything revolves around that, envelops around that. I'm not really going to do too much other than kind of just indicate, little bits of detail here and there. Now I can go a little bit more detailed out on the outside. So when it comes to the hands here, I want the hands to stick out more. So I'm not going to put a lot of detail inside of this here, especially where the hand is, because the hand is an important, eye-catching element, because it kind of gives interaction in the piece. So I like to keep that area kind of simple and not too messy. Alright, and we're almost done. I'm going to draw a little bit of that stem again because that kind of gives a nice little break. Add a little bit of buds for some shape language, and then let's finally add our last flower, or maybe two. Notice how I'm not adding too much detail, it's just kind of squiggles, you know. That's because I don't, once again, it's not meant to be like a realistic flower, it's meant to be a simplified flower. And there we have our little flower, our flower swing. So let's go ahead and zoom out and see how this is in comparison. So I think the level of detail in the swings is great because even though it's detailed, it's not it's not basically competing with our main subject because subject is more simple. This just more so frames our subject. So that's pretty much it for this video. I'm pretty much done lining. I will erase this whole thing, this whole pencil marking thing, and I'll see you guys in the next one, and we will get to the fun part, which is watercolor. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.